Ezra's morning started like any other, until it didn't. The familiar crunch of gravel under boots jolted him awake before the sun even crested the mountain peaks. He rubbed his eyes, squinting at the golden light spilling across his cabin. And then he saw it. The gate. A shiny, new padlock glinted in the early light, cold and unyielding. His cabin gate, the only access point in or out, was sealed shut. Ezra felt the blood drain from his face. His truck sat just behind it, useless, trapped. The old gate had been worn, sometimes squeaky, but it had never denied him access before. Until now. Not again, he muttered under his breath. The HOA notices had started months ago: improper landscaping, unauthorized firewood stack, non-compliance with gate aesthetics. Small, petty, mostly bureaucratic annoyances. Ezra had shrugged them off, paid the occasional fine, corrected minor infractions. But this? This wasn't a warning. This was an act of control, a blatant blockade designed to humiliate, frustrate, and intimidate. He ran his hand along the cold metal, feeling the weight of authority that had no legitimate claim over him. Ezra wasn't a man easily intimidated. He had survived the loss of his wife, Margaret, and the grind of city life in Denver. Pine Ridge, with its forested hills and tranquil isolation, had been his refuge. And now, suddenly, that sanctuary felt like a trap. Ezra's first instinct was anger. He wanted to call the HOA, yell, demand explanations. But something inside him urged calm. Panic would only give them leverage. The padlock was a challenge, not a sentence. He walked around the gate, checking for weak spots, any possible way to get out without breaking the law. There was none. Then he remembered the old deeds his grandfather had left behind, dusty papers stored in the cabin's library. Ezra had never had reason to study them closely; they were family relics more than practical documents. But as he glanced at the pile, a thought flickered: property disputes, title claims, easements. Maybe there was something here he had overlooked. Something that could turn the tables. Ezra's mind sharpened, shifting from panic to strategy. He didn't rush, he observed. The padlock was new but ordinary, and the fence sturdy but conventional. This wasn't a fortress. It was intimidation dressed as authority. And authority, no matter how arrogant, could be challenged if you knew where to push. He spent the morning documenting everything. Photos of the gate, the padlock, the signs posted by the HOA, all recorded with timestamps. Ezra knew that meticulous evidence would be his first weapon if this escalated. By mid-morning, the anger had subsided, replaced by a simmering resolve. The HOA had underestimated him. They had no idea who they were messing with. Ezra glanced toward the mountains, their peaks glowing with sunlight, and whispered a vow he hadn't spoken to anyone: "You can't lock me out of my life. Not now, not ever." He stepped back from the gate, eyes scanning the surrounding forest. He would find a way through, and when he did, they would learn exactly why Ezra had chosen Pine Ridge as his home, and why he would never be bullied off it. Ezra's morning started like any other, until it didn't. The familiar crunch of gravel under boots jolted him awake before the sun even crested the mountain peaks. He rubbed his eyes, squinting at the golden light spilling across his cabin. And then he saw it. The gate. A shiny, new padlock glinted in the early light, cold and unyielding. His cabin gate, the only access point in or out, was sealed shut. Ezra felt the blood drain from his face. His truck sat just behind it, useless, trapped. The old gate had been worn, sometimes squeaky, but it had never denied him access before. Until now. Not again, he muttered under his breath. The HOA notices had started months ago: improper landscaping, unauthorized firewood stack, non-compliance with gate aesthetics. Small, petty, mostly bureaucratic annoyances. Ezra had shrugged them off, paid the occasional fine, corrected minor infractions. But this? This wasn't a warning. This was an act of control, a blatant blockade designed to humiliate, frustrate, and intimidate. He ran his hand along the cold metal, feeling the weight of authority that had no legitimate claim over him. Ezra wasn't a man easily intimidated. He had survived the loss of his wife, Margaret, and the grind of city life in Denver. Pine Ridge, with its forested hills and tranquil isolation, had been his refuge. And now, suddenly, that sanctuary felt like a trap. Ezra's first instinct was anger. He wanted to call the HOA, yell, demand explanations. But something inside him urged calm. Panic would only give them leverage. The padlock was a challenge, not a sentence. He walked around the gate, checking for weak spots, any possible way to get out without breaking the law. There was none. Then he remembered the old deeds his grandfather had left behind, dusty papers stored in the cabin's library. Ezra had never had reason to study them closely, they were family relics more than practical documents. But as he glanced at the pile, a thought flickered: property disputes, title claims, easements, maybe there was something here he had overlooked. Something that could turn the tables. Ezra's mind sharpened, shifting from panic to strategy. He didn't rush, he observed. The padlock was new but ordinary, and the fence sturdy but conventional. This wasn't a fortress. It was intimidation dressed as authority. And authority, no matter how arrogant, could be challenged if you knew where to push. He spent the morning documenting everything. Photos of the gate, the padlock, the signs posted by the HOA, all recorded with timestamps. Ezra knew that meticulous evidence would be his first weapon if this escalated. By mid-morning, the anger had subsided, replaced by a simmering resolve. The HOA had underestimated him. They had no idea who they were messing with. Ezra glanced toward the mountains, their peaks glowing with sunlight, and whispered a vow he hadn't spoken to anyone: "You can't lock me out of my life. Not now, not ever." He stepped back from the gate, eyes scanning the surrounding forest. He would find a way through, and when he did, they would learn exactly why Ezra had chosen Pine Ridge as his home, and why he would never be bullied off it. Ezra spent the rest of the morning combing through the old deeds, maps, and property papers his grandfather had left behind. Dust floated in the sunbeams that pierced through the cabin windows, and the smell of aged paper filled the room. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a potential lifeline. Somewhere in these documents lay the key to regaining his freedom. His eyes landed on a map dated back to the 1920s, showing not only his cabin but a narrow path extending beyond the river that ran through the property. And there it was, a tiny notation: private bridge, owned by property holder. Ezra's heart skipped a beat. He had assumed the bridge beyond the river belonged to the HOA managed easement, but the map suggested otherwise. The bridge wasn't public. It was his. For the first time that morning, hope replaced frustration. If the gate was closed, the bridge could serve as his escape and his leverage. Ezra packed a small backpack with essentials: a flashlight, rope, water, and a crowbar, just in case. He needed to inspect the bridge, verify its condition, and plan his next move. The path to the bridge was overgrown but navigable. Ezra's boots pushed through thick underbrush, brushing against thorny branches and damp moss. The solitude of the forest was comforting: no HOA cameras, no drones, no prying eyes. Only the sounds of the river rushing below and birds calling to one another in the trees. And then he saw it, the bridge. It was old, wooden, and narrow, like something out of a pioneer's journal. The planks were weathered but solid, the ropes frayed at the edges but still holding firm. Ezra knelt beside it, inspecting each connection carefully. Yes, it was safe to cross, but the signs of age meant he had to be cautious. One misstep and the river below would turn a shortcut into disaster. Ezra tested the first plank with his weight, and it held. Slowly, deliberately, he crossed, feeling the subtle sway beneath his feet. Midway across, he paused, gazing at the water below. The river surged with a quiet force, rushing past boulders and carving a path that had existed long before any HOA rules. It was a reminder: nature didn't answer to bureaucracies. And neither would he. On the far side, Ezra paused again to take in his surroundings. This section of the property was untouched, wild, and entirely his. No fences, no signs, no limits imposed by anyone but himself. It was beautiful and strategic. From here, he could plan how to reclaim access to the cabin, document his legal rights, and, if necessary, confront the HOA with undeniable proof. Ezra returned to the cabin just as the sun began its descent behind the peaks. The locked gate still loomed, but now it was a challenge, not a barrier. He had options, evidence, and the resolve to fight back. That night, as he pored over the deeds and took notes by candlelight, a plan began to form, a plan that would make it impossible for the HOA to ignore the truth. The bridge was his, the property was his, and his cabin was not going anywhere. As darkness settled over Pine Ridge, Ezra felt a quiet thrill. For the first time since that locked gate appeared, he was no longer a victim. He was a man with leverage, a man with strategy, and most importantly, a man who understood that the fight was just beginning. The next morning, Ezra approached the locked gate with a newfound sense of purpose. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. He wasn't angry anymore, he was methodical, precise. Today wasn't about reacting, it was about asserting his rights. In his backpack, he carried the deeds, the maps, and a neatly organized folder of property documents. Every piece of evidence was prepared for one purpose, proving to the HOA that their attempt to seal off the cabin was illegal. Ezra knew that showing strength without evidence was pointless. Today, he would combine both. He noticed the HOA's security cameras mounted near the gate, little black domes silently observing. Ezra ignored them. They could record, but they couldn't alter the truth. His hand rested on the gate, cold and heavy under his grip. Then, from the other side, the first voices appeared, HOA security guards, 2 men in crisp uniforms, carrying clipboards and walkie-talkies. "Mr. Ezra Pine," one called out, his tone sharp and professional. "Yes," Ezra replied calmly, holding the documents in his hands. "I believe you need to see this." The guards exchanged uncertain glances as Ezra laid out the deeds and maps on the hood of his truck. The evidence was irrefutable. Every signature, every notation, every legal phrase confirmed the same thing: the bridge beyond the river, the path leading to his cabin, and the land surrounding it were all legally his. The HOA had no claim to restrict access. The taller guard, clipboard shaking slightly, muttered something into his walkie-talkie. Ezra could sense their unease. "You're aware that sealing this gate constitutes trespassing on private property?" he asked evenly, looking directly at them. "Yes," the shorter one said, voice tight. "But we were ordered." Ezra cut him off. "Orders don't override law. Look at this, the bridge, the easement, the original title. This is indisputable. If you block me here, you're violating my property rights." For a tense moment, no one spoke. The morning air felt thick, as if holding its breath. Ezra's gaze then shifted to the gate itself. A simple wooden structure, it had seemed insurmountable yesterday. Today, armed with knowledge, it was just an obstacle, a symbol of misplaced authority. "I suggest you open it," Ezra said firmly. "Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to escalate legally." The taller guard swallowed, glancing nervously at his partner. Finally, he reached into his pocket and made a call. Ezra could hear the muted voice of the HOA president over the speakerphone, giving orders that seemed hesitant and unsure. Minutes later, the guard stepped back. Ezra grasped the gate and pushed. It creaked, groaned, and then swung open effortlessly. Ezra paused for a moment, savoring the victory. Not out of arrogance, but out of quiet justice. The cabin beyond was safe once again, not because of confrontation, but because of truth and preparation. The HOA had overstepped, and the law had reminded them of their limits. As he walked past the gate, Ezra looked back at the guards, who now avoided eye contact. He didn't need to gloat, the documents had spoken louder than any argument. The bridge, the land, the cabin, it was all his. The fight wasn't over, but the first round had been won decisively. Crossing the cabin threshold, Ezra felt a sense of calm. Pine Ridge had thrown obstacles in his path, but knowledge and determination had prevailed. The cabin wasn't just a retreat anymore, it was a fortress, a testament to the power of preparation, patience, and the courage to confront those who misuse authority. Ezra spent the night at the cabin reviewing his plans. The morning air smelled of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the tension he felt. He knew the HOA wouldn't take this defeat quietly. They were organized, persistent, and used to enforcing rules with little regard for legality. The gate might have been open today, but he suspected a more aggressive move was on the horizon. By mid-morning, his instincts proved correct. A black SUV rolled slowly down the gravel path, its windows darkened. Inside sat three figures, HOA representatives, accompanied by a lawyer who waved papers from the passenger seat. Ezra watched from the porch, keeping calm, though his pulse quickened. This wasn't just security anymore, this was escalation. He stepped down from the porch, documents clutched firmly in his hand. "Good morning," he called out, voice steady. "I assume you're here to discuss the gate again?" The lawyer stepped forward, briefcase in hand, radiating authority. "Mr. Pine, the HOA has issued a notice of violation. You're accused of bypassing the association's restrictions. We require immediate compliance." Ezra raised an eyebrow. "Immediate compliance with what? My legal property rights? Because according to this," he tapped the folder, "I am fully entitled to access my cabin via the bridge and gate. You've been served notice, yet you persist in blocking my property." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Ezra could see the tension ripple through the group. "You don't understand," one of the HOA reps said nervously. "We have bylaws." "Bylaws cannot supersede the law of the land," Ezra interrupted firmly. "I have the title, the easement, and the original deeds. Every legal avenue confirms my right. If you attempt to physically prevent my access again, you will be liable for trespass and potential civil damages." The black SUV rolled closer, engine humming low. Ezra's eyes never left the lawyer, but his mind mapped out the situation. If they tried to block the gate, he would need more than documents, he would need witnesses and a recorded record of their actions. Technology, he decided, could become his ally. He stepped aside, motioning toward the cabin path. "I suggest we keep this civil. I have no desire to escalate beyond necessary measures, but I am prepared to protect my property." Minutes passed in an uneasy standoff. Then the lawyer sighed, clearly frustrated, flipping through Ezra's papers. "You've certainly prepared well. We will have to review this matter with the board." Ezra nodded, sensing both victory and caution. "Do that. But in the meantime, the gate remains open. Access is not negotiable." The SUV backed down the driveway, leaving Ezra alone again. He exhaled slowly, but there was no time to relax. This was only the first official countermove from the HOA. He knew they might attempt lawsuits, fines, or bureaucratic maneuvers. But today had shown him that preparation, documentation, and calm confrontation could outmatch intimidation. Returning to the cabin, Ezra updated his digital log, noting every interaction, recording license plates, and photographing the documents he had shown. This wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. He had learned long ago that in conflicts with organized opposition, evidence was the most powerful weapon. From the porch, he looked out over the bridge, the sun glinting off the river below. The path to his cabin was clear, for now. But Ezra knew Pine Ridge wouldn't stay quiet. Every action would be met with reaction, and every threat required anticipation. The next moves in this high-stakes game were yet to come, and he intended to stay 3 steps ahead. Ezra woke early the next day, the morning fog still clinging to the trees around the cabin. The previous day's confrontation had left him alert and calculating. He knew the HOA wouldn't simply back down, they were organized, relentless, and desperate to assert control. Today, he had to take the initiative. First, he reviewed the legal documents again, property deeds, easement agreements, and official correspondence proving his rights to the bridge and cabin. Each sheet was carefully annotated. He prepared duplicates for the local authorities and a trusted real estate attorney, ensuring that no attempt to block him would catch him off guard. Preparation, Ezra reminded himself, was the cornerstone of victory. By mid-morning, the black SUV appeared again, moving cautiously along the driveway. This time, 2 additional vehicles followed, a sign that the HOA had escalated their presence. Ezra didn't panic. He retrieved his phone and began live-streaming the scene to a secure account, ensuring that every action would be documented in real time. As the first HOA representative stepped out, clipboard in hand, Ezra calmly greeted them. "Good morning. I see you brought reinforcements. How thoughtful." His tone was neutral but firm, carrying the weight of authority. "We require compliance," the lead representative said, voice strained. "The board has ordered you to cease using the bridge. This is your final warning." Ezra smiled, carefully controlled. "Final warning noted. However, under state law and the original property deeds, my right of access is non-negotiable. Attempting to block the bridge or restrict access will constitute trespass. You have been formally notified." He gestured toward the cameras recording every movement. "I am documenting everything. Your actions are public record, and I have legal representation ready should this situation escalate." The tension was palpable. The representatives glanced at each other, uncertainty creeping into their posture. Ezra seized the moment. He stepped forward, holding up his annotated deeds. "I am prepared to file injunctions and pursue civil action immediately if this is challenged. I recommend we resolve this matter professionally rather than through confrontation." For a long minute, silence hung over the driveway. Ezra's calm but unyielding demeanor contrasted sharply with the HOA's tension. Then, the lead representative muttered something under their breath and gestured to the others. They returned to their vehicles, engines starting reluctantly. Ezra watched them leave, but he didn't relax yet. Inside the cabin, he analyzed the encounter. It had been a victory, but not the end. The HOA had shown they were willing to escalate, he had shown they were not intimidated. Ezra spent the afternoon drafting a detailed report of the confrontation, sending copies to his attorney and local authorities, and reinforcing the cabin's security systems. He also checked the bridge, ensuring no tampering had occurred overnight. By sunset, Ezra finally allowed himself a measured breath. He stood on the porch, looking at the bridge illuminated by the fading light. His counterstrike had worked, he had forced the HOA to retreat, but he knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The fight for his property rights was far from over. Yet, in this early stage, he had demonstrated one crucial truth: intimidation would not work on him. Every step of the way, Ezra's meticulous preparation, unwavering calm, and clear understanding of the law had turned the tables. As night fell, he felt a surge of determination. The bridge connected more than just the cabin to the outside world, it was a symbol of his rights, his strategy, and his unwillingness to surrender. Whatever the HOA tried next, Ezra was ready. Ezra awoke to the sound of engines rumbling in the distance. He had suspected the HOA wouldn't stay down for long, and now their next move was clear: they were escalating. Peering through the window, he saw a small convoy of trucks and SUVs approaching the cabin, each bearing official-looking placards and flashing lights. His first instinct was to remain calm. Ezra had anticipated this. He immediately called his attorney, briefing them on the situation, and simultaneously activated additional security cameras around the bridge and cabin perimeter. Every step of the HOA's advance would be recorded. Preparation, he reminded himself, was everything. By mid-morning, the convoy arrived at the bridge. The lead vehicle stopped abruptly, blocking access, while 2 others flanked it. A group of HOA representatives stepped out, clipboard in hand, faces set with determination. One of them, an older woman Ezra recognized from previous confrontations, took a deep breath and addressed him. "You've ignored multiple notices," she said. "The board is taking control. The bridge is officially closed to you. You must comply." Ezra remained standing on the porch, unflinching. "Officially closed," he repeated. "Under whose authority?" The easement laws and property deeds clearly grant me full access. Any attempt to block the bridge constitutes trespass, which I am documenting." He gestured toward the cameras, ensuring they understood every move was being recorded. The representatives exchanged tense glances. Ezra used the moment to his advantage. "I have also notified local authorities of this confrontation. If any of you attempt to cross the bridge or interfere with my property, law enforcement will be called immediately." The lead representative's hand trembled slightly as they rifled through papers. Ezra noticed the uncertainty creeping into their stance. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Suddenly, one of the representatives tried to step onto the bridge, likely to intimidate him physically. Ezra didn't move but calmly dialed 911, stating clearly, "This is a trespass in progress. I am at cabin address, and the HOA representatives are attempting to block my legal access." The dispatcher assured him officers were en route. The HOA representatives froze, realizing their escalation could backfire legally. Ezra's composed response, combined with immediate law enforcement notification, shifted the balance. They backed away slightly, muttering under their breath. Ezra held his ground, projecting a calm authority that made confrontation seem both risky and futile for them. By mid-afternoon, the situation began to stabilize. The HOA retreated temporarily, leaving a single vehicle parked at the edge of the property as a symbolic warning. Ezra didn't celebrate. He knew this was a temporary reprieve, a pause before the next possible move. He spent the evening reinforcing security measures, checking the bridge's structural integrity, and reviewing legal documents for any additional leverage. As twilight settled over the cabin, Ezra reflected on the day. The HOA had tried to escalate, but his preparation, calm strategy, and knowledge of the law had neutralized their aggression. Each confrontation strengthened his position, teaching him how to anticipate their moves and respond decisively. The fight was far from over. The HOA would continue to test boundaries, but Ezra had proven one undeniable truth: intimidation could not overcome preparation, legal rights, and strategic thinking. As the first stars appeared in the sky, he stood on the porch, watching the bridge stretch out into the fading light, a symbol of resilience and control. Whatever came next, Ezra was ready. The morning fog hung low over the cabin, making the bridge look like a silver ribbon floating in the mist. Ezra knew today could be pivotal. After days of escalating confrontations, he anticipated the HOA wouldn't simply retreat, they would test him one final time. He wasn't about to be caught off guard. By sunrise, he had already checked every camera, sensor, and lock. He reviewed his legal documents one last time, ensuring every clause in the property deed, easement, and local ordinance was memorized. This wasn't just about access to a bridge, it was about asserting his rights, and he intended to do it decisively. It wasn't long before headlights pierced the fog. This time, the HOA arrived with a larger contingent, nearly double the number of vehicles from the previous encounter. The lead SUV stopped at the edge of the bridge while the others spread out, clearly aiming to create a blockade. Ezra could sense the tension. They were hoping for intimidation, perhaps a rash reaction on his part. Ezra stayed calm. He had anticipated their tactics. From inside the cabin, he activated the loudspeakers connected to his cameras, addressing the approaching group directly. "You are trespassing on private property. Any attempt to block the bridge or cross it without legal authority is a violation. Law enforcement has been notified, and all actions are being recorded." The HOA representatives hesitated, but the leader, confident, almost arrogantly so, stepped forward. "Ezra, enough games. Step aside. This bridge is under HOA jurisdiction now. If you resist, we will take enforcement measures." Ezra didn't flinch. He slowly walked to the edge of the porch, holding a tablet showing the property deed, easement details, and legal notices. "You have repeatedly ignored these facts," he said, voice calm but firm. "This bridge is my legal access. Any attempt to enforce a closure is unlawful. This is your final warning." Then, strategically, he pressed a button on the tablet. The cameras around the property switched to live feed mode, broadcasting the confrontation directly to local authorities, his attorney, and a live social media channel he had prepped in case of an emergency. Within minutes, neighbors and legal observers were watching the HOA's every move. The tension reached a peak. The HOA leader shouted, "We can still," before a uniformed police officer arrived, flanked by additional patrol units. The fog seemed to thicken around them, dramatic and heavy, like a movie scene. Ezra stepped back, giving the authorities room to intervene. The officers carefully separated both parties. They reviewed Ezra's documentation and confirmed his rights. The HOA representatives, caught between law and the watching public, realized they were cornered. Any aggressive move now could result in criminal charges or civil liability. Slowly, they withdrew, their pride bruised but their attempts thwarted. Ezra exhaled, feeling the weight of the ordeal lift slightly. Today had been a test of patience, strategy, and courage. The bridge, now fully under his control, stood as a symbol of his resilience. But Ezra knew this wasn't just about winning a confrontation, it was about asserting boundaries, respecting law, and proving that preparation and knowledge could overcome intimidation. As he watched the last of the HOA vehicles disappear into the distance, Ezra allowed himself a quiet moment of satisfaction. He hadn't just defended a bridge, he had defended his rights, his property, and his peace of mind. And while the road ahead might hold new challenges, one thing was certain, Ezra would face them with unwavering resolve. The bridge stretched across the morning mist, and for the first time in days, Ezra felt a sense of control, and a readiness for whatever came next. The sun was fully risen now, burning away the early morning fog and revealing the full span of the bridge that had become the center of Ezra's battle. Birds chirped, unaware of the human drama that had unfolded around them, and yet their songs somehow felt like a celebration. Ezra stood on the bridge, surveying it with a quiet satisfaction. Today, the battle was over, and the outcome was undeniable. Over the past week, the HOA's repeated attempts to intimidate him had only strengthened his resolve. He had anticipated every tactic, verbal threats, legal loophole exploitation, and even attempts to forcefully close access. But Ezra's preparation, meticulous documentation, strategic camera placements, and prearranged legal support had left them exposed and powerless. The officers who had intervened yesterday remained nearby, ensuring that no further harassment would occur. Their presence added an official seal to Ezra's victory, and any lingering doubts about the legality of his claim had been thoroughly eliminated. The HOA representatives, now fully aware that they had overstepped their authority, had retreated to regroup, though Ezra doubted they would return. Their bluff had been called, and thoroughly defeated. As he walked across the bridge, Ezra reflected on the lessons of this confrontation. It wasn't just about property rights, it was about standing firm in the face of intimidation, using knowledge and preparation as his shield. Every threat, every aggressive maneuver from the HOA had been a test of his patience, judgment, and courage. And he had passed with flying colors. Neighbors who had followed the events through social media and word of mouth began to arrive, expressing support and congratulations. Some had previously been hesitant to challenge the HOA themselves, and now they were inspired by Ezra's example. He welcomed them, sharing a few words about the importance of knowing one's rights and standing up for them, but also about doing so strategically and safely. Later in the afternoon, Ezra sat on the porch of his cabin, the bridge stretching before him like a ribbon of victory. He opened a small journal, jotting down notes and reflections about the ordeal. He knew that the HOA might attempt another minor challenge in the future. People rarely accept defeat gracefully, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The bridge, which had been a point of contention and stress, now symbolized resilience and control. Each plank, each beam, each carefully maintained support represented not just his property rights, but his patience, strategy, and courage under pressure. Ezra realized that his fight had given him more than legal victory, it had strengthened his confidence and his reputation in the community. As evening fell, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Ezra felt a profound sense of closure. The HOA's attempts to dominate and intimidate him had failed, and in the process, he had reminded everyone that preparation, knowledge, and calm determination are far more powerful than threats or aggression. The cabin and bridge stood untouched, a testament to Ezra's perseverance. And as he closed the day with a quiet smile, he understood that victory wasn't simply about winning a battle, it was about proving to himself and others that boundaries, once clearly defined and firmly defended, can never be taken lightly. The sun set over the bridge, casting long shadows that stretched toward the cabin. Ezra took a deep breath, letting the satisfaction of the day wash over him. Today, he had not just defended a bridge, he had defended his rights, his home, and his peace of mind. And for the first time in weeks, everything felt truly, finally at ease.